next few minutes, I pray that I would just be a person that's conveying your words. Not the center of attention, but that you would be. Thank you that you love us. We love you. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. So today we're going to open our Bibles. We're going to actually look into a little bit of the Sermon on the Mount. And before we go into that, I want to share a couple things with you. Just maybe a little glimpse into some things that Pastor Jason has dealt with. So a little over 5 years ago, my wife and I were on a plane to Egypt. All right, so in March of, going on 6 years ago now, March of 2020, which was, we all know, we remember to be quite a time. March of 2020, Lindsay and I were on our way to Egypt. It was a good thing. It was a wonderful thing. We got to actually serve there on a short-term missions trip. We served some Sudanese refugees there. We got to see some churches that my uncle and his wife serve in. The reason that they live in Egypt now is because they originally went there to be missionaries. Now they serve there as teachers full-time. So we go to Egypt. It's March of 2020, and if you remember, COVID was beginning to really ramp up. It was one of those things that we were starting to acknowledge, although the things that we remember most about COVID hadn't happened yet. There was no shutdown. There was no any of that stuff at the point where we flew out of here. So we go to Egypt. We did enjoy ourselves. We got to see some amazing things. The pyramids, the Sphinx, those kinds of things. We got to tour things. It was an amazing experience. And just to be in a culture, in a country that's experienced so much history was really, really a challenging thing. We got to float down the Nile River, all these things. And you go, wow, this is the area where people like Moses walked. It was a cool experience. But what I'm getting to is the experience shifted quickly when the President of the United States went on to national television and made the announcement that we're shutting down the borders of the U.S. In other words, we're not letting anyone in, probably not anyone out in a little while. So here we were in Egypt, and it was about 2 a.m. We started receiving messages from people going, you guys okay? We didn't know any of this happened. We had no idea. We knew that things were getting tense, but now we're waking up at 3 a.m. or so in Egypt going, we're stuck in Egypt forever. Like, we're never going to get out of here. It was a very nerve-wracking time. All of a sudden, we're sitting in the outskirts of Cairo in my uncle and aunt's apartment condo where they live, and we're going, this is scary. We started looking at flights. Of course, it just so happens when all of a sudden there's an extreme panic about getting home flights, the cost of flights go way up, in case you ever want to know that. So fortunately, we were able to keep the schedule that we had. We had a little bit of a come to Jesus conversation with my uncle and his wife, like, listen, you're an American citizen. They will allow you to go back home. Don't worry. They were right. They were right. We flew home a day early, but all was well. So what am I getting to? As you look up onto the slide and you see the top word says anger. We flew from Cairo into Paris and then to Detroit. And while we were on these flights, I started to realize that I really don't like to fly. I don't like flying in the least. Actually, it's gotten worse for me. I'm not afraid to fly, I just don't enjoy it. And when you're on a flight for like 7 or 8 or 9 hours, however long those legs of the journey were, that's torture. And I'm not somebody that needs to constantly move, but I watched the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy while on this flight. That's too long. That's too long. So we're flying home. We land in Detroit finally. And then we just sit there. We sit there. And we're back in the States. We turn on our phones and start getting all these new messages We come out of the airplane and walk down the ramp and all that stuff, and we're met by these things that nobody ever were confronted with in an airport before. All this COVID protocol. Now keep in mind, nobody knew what was even going on. Like, what is this? I don't know. It felt kind of like, you know how on E.T., when Elliot, the young boy, and E.T. get really sick, and now there's all these plastic things, and people are wearing masks and hospital gowns and all this stuff. It started feeling like that to me. Like, we're entering this world of, like, we don't know what's going on, but you just landed from a foreign country, and we're going to just examine everything that happened. It was interesting. As this started to unfold, I started to get very agitated, angry. I just want to go home. And now I've got to sit in this situation for hours. They asked us questions that seemed to be private questions. They insinuated that now we were sick. There was all kinds of stuff going on. And keep in mind, now that I look back, I can look at it a little more merciful. Like, none of us knew what was happening. This was a pandemic time, and we're all trying to figure out what to do. I understand that now, but in the moment, I was like, I just want to leave. I don't want anyone telling me what to do. I'm angry. And not to mention, with that, as I turned on my phone, I looked at it, and I had messages from people that said, you should quarantine for 2 weeks. Like, I feel like I've been in this plane seat for 2 weeks. I can't stay in my house for 2 weeks either. What turned out to happen is we got home, we settled into our home. We had found out a short while before that the schools all shut down while we were gone. We had friends and family that were taking care of our kids. They were making do. So as we got home, we thought, okay, well, I guess we're going to have to quarantine. Well, then the whole world quarantined. So, like, all of us stayed home for a while there. But there was this anger that just kind of stirred up in me. Like, this is not what I want. There are people here that I don't know that are shining flashlights in my eyes and in our mouths and all this stuff. Like, what is going on? I just kept getting more and more angry. We're going to talk about anger today for just a little while and how Jesus looked at it. So if you want to, or if you would, please turn in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 5. We're going to look at the Sermon on the Mount, some parts of it, just a particular part today. So the Sermon on the Mount is really one of the most famous sermons ever given. This is early in Jesus' ministry, and he begins to simply speak to his disciples as a crowd gathers. And he goes through some amazing things, some things that we hear today, and we go like, well, this seems to be pretty good stuff. Like, we read it, and we say, okay, these are things we should live by. There are many things that Jesus said that people really considered to be pretty radical. These are new ideas that Jesus is challenging them with. He starts out by saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be confronted. These are things that people sort of knew, but they didn't know the degree to which Jesus wanted to take them. We're actually going to start in verse 21. This is a real specific thing that Jesus starts talking about. I'm going to read this. This is actually a little bit shorter than we've read the last few weeks. We're going to read Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 26. It says, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not murder. Anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, Raka, and we'll get to that in a little while. Anyone who says to his brother, Raka, is answerable to the Sanhedrin. But anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still with him on the way, or he may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. I tell you the truth, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. So this is kind of interesting. Some of this is common sense, right? Jesus says, hey, you've heard it said, do not murder. That's a good thing to live by, okay? I would say that's one of the most basic, fundamental things in the human race. Like, are there wrong things? Are there things that we should not do? Well, one of the things we shouldn't do is kill each other, okay? I think we're all on the same page there. Jesus is actually saying that too. Like, you've heard this said, do not murder. This is one of the 10 Commandments. This is one of the things that's just a deplorable act that the Bible is very clear on. Do not murder. People's lives are not to be taken into your hand where now you become the judge and jury and say, I think this person just deserves to have their life ended. Jesus says, no, that's not a thing, but you know that. You know that. So then he takes it a step further, and I almost titled this this sermon, You've Heard It Said, but I went in a little different direction. In verse 22, Jesus says, but I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Now, I want to take a minute and pause there. There are many of you that would remember the story, and we've talked about it here before. You would remember the story of Jesus being angry. And we would actually look in the Old Testament and we would say, well, there were times that the Bible actually says God burned with anger at the people. Let me remind you of a couple simple truths. You are not God. I am not God. Jesus is cited in the New Testament to be in the temple, and he is filled with what we now call holy anger, where he flipped the tables and said, you're making a mockery of this place. You're turning it into a den of robbers. Jesus was righteously angry. Now, it is possible for us to be angry about things like this and say, I'm just filled with a righteous anger. Yes, that is possible. But I would say to you, most of the time when we say things like, oh, I just feel so righteously angry, we think that gives us a license to do things that we now know that we should recognize as sin. Most of the time when human beings like myself are angry, we think that gives us a license to now insult. We think that gives us a license to get even. We think it gives us a license to take matters into our own hands, and that's never something that the Bible permits us to do. Jesus takes matters into his own hands. He says, this is my house. You've made it into a den of robbers. I'm ridding this place of those actions. That was appropriate. But if somebody walks out of this service and says, I'm going to go flip some tables because I don't like the way it looks out here, that's not what Jesus did. So I would just caution you to be careful when we cite things like, yeah, but Jesus was righteously angry and he was filled with holiness even though he was angry. Yes. And we're called to be like Jesus. We're called to be compassionate like Jesus. And these are Jesus' words right here where he says in verse 22, but I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, Raka, is answerable to the Sanhedrin, but anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Charles, you can go to that next slide. So instead of reading this and saying, you have heard that it was said, I simply put Jesus as saying, take note. And at the bottom, I put this, and maybe it's hard for you to see with that daylight coming in. It says, does God get your least? And then in parentheses, I put at. Does God get your at least? Well, at least I haven't done this. At least I haven't done that. Jesus says right here, this is for all of you that say, at least I'm not a murderer. Jesus says, you know that murder is wrong. You know that murder is something that I would say, stay away from. Don't let it come to this. And many of you are thinking, well, I guess I'm all right. A lot of times we give ourselves the permission, again, to go, maybe I'm pretty good. Maybe I'm pretty good on my own. Maybe I'm just a good person. Jesus is saying, take note, I'm telling you, don't be a person that says, well, at least I haven't. You can fill in the blank. In this case right here, Jesus says, you've heard it said, don't murder. And then he goes into this thing, but I tell you, if you're even angry with your brother, be cautious. Be cautious. Take note. Don't be the person that says, at least I haven't. We can easily become people that are at least kind of people. At least I've never done what that guy's done. At least I've never been to the point where this woman has been. Before we know it, we build ourselves up into what I would fear as we build ourselves up into in our own minds as God. At least I haven't done this. At least I haven't done that. Therefore, I'm better. Jesus says again, this is for all of you that say, at least I haven't this. He's saying, I guarantee everyone within the sound of my voice has been angry with their brother. So Jesus doesn't just stop there, okay? Because some of you are like, wait a minute, I thought anger was an emotion, and sometimes we just can't help it. Yes, that is true. There are times where anger is stirred up in us, and yes, what matters very deeply is what we do with that anger. So we're going to look at that. But remember, Jesus says, take note. Don't be the type of person that just says, well, at least I've never killed somebody. Jesus says, let's check your heart. Let's check the sources of your anger here. So if you would, Charles, you can go to that next one. I would say that Jesus is wanting us to very much take it to heart. Now, what does this mean? Jesus is challenging us to start rethinking some of the ways we do things. Jesus says, hey, it's easy. Many of you have known this for generations. You've taught this to your children. Do not murder. This is one of the 10 commandments. This is something that you know. I want you to take it a step further. It matters to me the condition of your heart. It matters to me the kind of character you practice and portray. What is it like on the inside? Are you somebody that is overwhelmed and overcome by anger? Take it to heart. Does God get your at least? Are you the type of person that says, at least I haven't done this? Take it to heart. I want to challenge you to consider something. I'm going to read from the first act of murder ever recorded. You don't have to turn there. This is from Genesis chapter 4. I will read a few verses to you. It says this, Adam lay with his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, with the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man. Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. But Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering. But on Cain and his offering, he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face so downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Now, what am I saying and what am I not saying? I am not saying that every time you're a little annoyed or angry with somebody that you're about to kill them. What I want you to see is this started with an anger that Cain allowed to just fester inside of him. And we're not given a great description in the Bible here. This is an account in Genesis that actually Moses wrote of Cain murdering his brother. And as we look at it, the source of this was anger. And I want to challenge you because God says a couple things. And I think the biggest highlight we need to take from here is God saying to Cain, sin is going to be something that is prevalent in your life. The sin of even anger is going to be something that you've got to deal with. And God says to him, you must master it. How many times do we go throughout our days, throughout our lives, and say, this is just who I am. This is what I do. I'm just known to be an angry person. Everybody needs to tiptoe around me because you can't set me off. I just get angry. That's just who I am. God says to Cain in this passage, no. This doesn't get to be something that defines you. You must master it. Another story into the life of Pastor Jason that's somewhat perhaps comical and somewhat embarrassing if you're me. A couple years ago, we went on spring break, and I think my wife probably knows exactly where I'm going with this one. For the first time in a long time, we said, you know what, we're gonna go on like a big spring break. So we went on a cruise, and we met some family there. It was kind of comical. I called my parents, and I was like, hey, Dad, we're thinking about going on this cruise. Can you tell us some things? It's been a while since we've done something like this. And Dad answered some questions and stuff, and I hung up the phone with Dad. About 5 minutes later, he calls back. And no offense, Mom and Dad, if you're listening, it was a great time. Dad calls back, and he was like, hey, you want us to go with you? Sure, yeah. So we went together. My parents went with us. My brother and his wife went, and their kids. And it was fun. Now, it wasn't fun because of the company. It was great company. It was spring break. You go on a cruise to warm weather. And it rained the entire time. And it was like 60 the entire time. There was actually one point, and I'm not trying to have pity party up here. I'm just giving you some context. There was one point where we were hanging out by the pools, and the rain just started torrentially pouring down. And we had to get over to the edges underneath these overhangs. And we were standing in water deeper than our ankles going, welcome to the Bahamas cruise. Our children have this idea. This was, the only cruise they'd been on. This is their idea of a cruise now. So now if we ever, should we do something like that again? They're like, no. Well, there was this incident on this cruise, and I'm giving you this context because I was you're feeling frustrated. Like, I want this to be a good experience for my family. And there was one morning where we went up to the top deck and we got our seats, and even on a cruise where it's 62 for the high, people want these beach chairs, these chairs that are by the pools. And so you got to save these things. These people are like vultures on these cruise ships. As a family, we're sitting in our seats. Okay, the five of us, my family and I, my parents and a couple of my siblings, my brother and his wife and his kids, and I'm sitting in this chair. I'm sort of enjoying the time. And I get up, and I just move just a little bit. In fact, my hand is still on this beach chair. And this guy comes and sits in it. He sat in my chair. He sat in this chair. I'm still holding this chair. And not to mention, it's between my family. It's like, why would you want to sit right here between these people you don't even know? And I don't remember exactly how it happened. I believe my daughter Gracie was with me, and so we both got up. And so this man and his wife sit, and they quit. It was like written into a movie script, like, all right, they're getting up, now sit, take action, go. These two people just plop in these chairs, and I didn't even know what was going on. And I wasn't going to have that. So I don't remember how the conversation began. I was like, these are our chairs. This is where my family's sitting. These are my chairs. Well, we'll get to that later. I said to them, these are ours. Like, we're just getting up to go. I don't even remember what we were doing. And the lady said, well, they weren't taken. We're going to stay here. I looked at them in disbelief, and I said, no. These are our chairs. They said, well, you got up. And my blood started to boil. Like, this is a simple, this shouldn't have been that big a deal. But the next second after they said that, I should cover up my microphone because I yelled at them. I said, my hand is still on it. Like, this how can you be this way? Like, I was upset. And I raised my voice at this guy. I don't think, it's been a while since that kind of thing came out of me. In fact, a little while later, it kind of worried me. Like, boy, I kind of lost it about this chair. And so the guy screams back to me. He said, all right, we'll move then. And I was like, good, get out of here. In that moment, as we read this passage, we read this word, and it's raka. This is not a word we use very often. This word actually insinuates that you're worthless. You have no worth. You're worth less than dirt. Jesus says if people say this to each other, they're subject to the Sanhedrin, and if we call each other you fool, this is like grounds for legal ramifications in Jesus' day. And in that moment, I felt this to my core. Like, this guy took my chair. He doesn't just need to go somewhere else. He needs to be tossed off this ship. Like, this guy, you can see I've gotten over this. This guy and his wife, like, who do they think they are? And I will tell you, in that moment, the anger that burned inside of me over something so simple was troublesome. My children saw this. In fact, some of my family still laughs about this. It's been a while since we've talked about it, but my children saw this. After a while, I actually did find this gentleman. Some of it is because I will just tell you, like, I was fairly new on scene, but I was lead pastor of this church. This isn't that long ago. And so I thought, I guess I shouldn't act like that. I found this man, and I apologized to him, and he apologized to me. It was a kind of childish thing that happened, and I actually thought to myself, if somebody saw me do this, what would they think of me? So it did cause me to go apologize, and I will tell you what, I can stand up here in front of you and say, in that moment, the anger that seemed to come out of nowhere was so real. And in that moment, that man was worthless to me. This is what Jesus is talking about. Unfortunately, he probably didn't mean to be talking to people that were on a cruise, that lost their seat. You know, Jesus, I would like to think, is talking about real life stuff. Your brother has harmed you deeply. You've been hurt deeply by a friend. There are people in here that are walking through things that I've never walked through, that are going, how do I make it through this? My marriage is crumbling and ending, and it is so painful, and I'm so full of anger. Jesus doesn't say, just ignore that, just pretend everything is okay. So the next thing that we need to look at is this. What do we do with these things? God tells Cain, you must master these things. Okay, what do we do? So in verse 23, Jesus says, therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to your brother. Then come and offer your gift. It's fitting that today we're going to be observing communion together. So communion is really something that we celebrate together, that we remember that Jesus made himself a sacrifice for us in our place. Today, as we observe communion together, I challenge you in this way. if you have something against a brother, a friend, a neighbor, I would challenge you that before you come up here, this doesn't have to be a big public spectacle, that before you come up here and say, thank you, Jesus, for the sacrifice you've made for me, I'd encourage you to send a text message. I'd encourage you to step out into the lobby and make a phone call. It's pretty deep. I would encourage you to even consider, if that's not something that can happen today, that you would say, you know what? I'm going to leave my sacrifice at the altar. In other words, in terms of communion today, maybe you say to yourself, I'm not going to take this. I'm going to reconcile with this person. Jesus says in verse 23, therefore, we're going to read this again, if you are offering your gift at the altar, so he takes them as he's preaching this Sermon on the Mount, he goes into the context of the temple. He says, the next time you're there, if you remember, I have a problem with a friend. I have a problem with a loved one. I need to settle that. Leave your sacrifice. Don't make it until things are settled with them. This morning, I would challenge you, before you come and accept what Jesus has done for you as his sacrifice, that we get to accept, send the text message, make the phone call, reconcile. I know that's difficult. We're not going to count the pieces of bread that are left here. If today is a day that you say, before I take this, I'm going to reconcile with my brother, then do it. Excuse me. If today you say, there is a problem that I need to handle with someone that I love, please do that. Now, some of you might say, like, well, what if I can't get a hold of them? What if I can't make this right? What if they won't speak to me? Remember, this is an illustration that Jesus gives. He goes on, and he says in verse 25, settle matters quickly. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. So now Jesus even compares this to a possible legal action. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you're still with him on the way, or may he hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. I tell you the truth, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. So Jesus is preaching this in a day where there was this thing called debtor's prison, debtor's jail, and if you owed a deep debt, you could actually be thrown into jail, and you'd had to work it off there. Now, it was a much more painful and slow process, and Jesus is saying, let's not let it come to that. There are people in this room, myself included at times, where anger just simmers and burns and takes deep root in our hearts and in us so deeply that it cripples us from doing anything else in a healthy way. Jesus is telling us, don't be the type of people that say, at least I don't. Be the type of people whose heart conditions matter. Be the type of people that will settle things with each other, that will reconcile, or at least make every attempt to do it. Settle matters quickly. That's difficult for some of us. Make it right with your brother. Leave your sacrifice. Go reconcile. Are you somebody that gets overwhelmed and overcome by anger? A lot of times we say, well, I don't know what to do about that. Jesus gives us the way. It might not be something that you desire to do, but he says, if this is a problem for you, go to your brother and talk to him. He tells Cain way back in the Old Testament, one of the first stories we ever read, you must master this. Here's some ways to do this. We're going to observe communion together. If you've never been here before and taken communion with us before, that is fine. You do not have to be a member of this church to take communion. We just ask that you would be pursuing a relationship with Jesus, that you'd acknowledge that you do have a relationship with him as we are recognizing what he's done for us. Jesus was with his disciples, and he told them, the time's coming, it's very near. I'm going to go, I'm going to be executed. He says, this bread, this represents my body. When you eat it, I want you to remember me. I want you to remember what I'm doing for you. And this cup represents my blood, the blood that I'm going to shed for you. When you drink this, remember me and what I've done for you. There's somebody in this room that says, before I take this, I need to make things right with someone. I was talking to somebody a little bit before the service started about Planet Fitness. They tell you that it's a judgment-free zone. This is a judgment-free zone. If you don't come forward for communion, nobody in this room is going to say, oh, they must have a big problem with their brother. I can't wait to find out what that is. That's no one's business in this space. That's between them and the Lord. I'm going to invite you to come forward. I'm going to invite you to stand. We're going to pray. After we do that, here's what we will do. You can stand. Sorry, go ahead. After we have everyone come forward, what we're going to do, similar to the last time we observed communion together, you can go back, you can sit in your seats if you would like to, and do business with God. You can take your communion, the elements, and you can walk straight out the door if you would like to. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm not giving you the kick out. But we're going to have a time where it's just you and God. After that is over, there's no formal ending after this. You can join us in the activity center for a potluck lunch. You can stay in your seat and you can pray. You can step out into the lobby or to our left or to our right and reconcile with someone. After we observe this, we're going to go straight to the activity center to eat. There'll be a little bit of a delay. That's the next thing. So as I pray, we're going to acknowledge that so we don't have to try to round everybody up and pray again in the activity center when everyone's talking. You can just go in there and begin eating. As you come forward, I want you to remember what Jesus has done for you. That he doesn't burn with anger at you. That he says, because of what I've done for you, you've been forgiven. I want you to receive me. I've done this for you. I'm going to pray, and as soon as I'm done, you can make your way down the center aisle and receive these elements. If you're somebody that would much rather stay in your seats, my friend Tim is going to come around with some of these elements and serve you